Thank you everyone for joining. Um, this a very timely and wonderful poem. Um, I want to begin with a little quotation from a friend of Adam Zagajewski. Adam died this spring, April or May, and his friend, the poet Ilya Kaminsky, who was born in Ukraine, in Odessa, um, wrote this wonderful thing about Adam Zagajewski. Hi, Steve. What I love about his poems is how, in the second half of the horror that was the 20th century, knowing what happened to Federico Garcia Lorca, Cesar Vallejo, Marina Tsvetaeva, Osip Mandelstam, Paul Celan, and countless others, Adam insisted that a poem can be both an elegy for what happened and also a hymn to life. He gave us, if not a healing, then a way to go on, to give each other a measure of reprieve, music, and gentleness. So Lvov is, of course, what we now call Lviv by its Ukrainian name, rather than by its Soviet name. Adam Zagajewski was born there, but he was forced to leave with his family when he was only a few months old. So he never really lived there. And Lvov, I've been sort of reading about the history of Lviv, and the whole 20th century, I mean, it was all over the place. I mean, its borders kept changing really from before World War I till after World War II. It was part of Poland. It was part of the Soviet Union. Of course, it's now the western border of Ukraine. What it is in this poem is something quite extraordinary, I think, and not just geographical, not just a geographical place. So it's long, but I would like to read it to you. To go to Lvov. To go to Lvov. Which station for Lvov, if not in a dream, at dawn, when dew gleams on a suitcase, when express trains and bullet trains are being born, to leave in haste for Lvov, night or day, in September or in March, but only if Lvov exists, if it is to be found within the frontiers and not just in my new passport. If lances of trees, of poplar and ash, still breathe aloud like Indians, and if streams mumble their dark Esperanto, and grass snakes, like soft signs in the Russian language, disappear into thickets. To pack and set off, to leave without a trace at noon, to vanish like fainting maidens, and burdocks green armies of burdocks, and below, under the canvas of a Venetian cafe, the snails converse about eternity. But the cathedral rises, you remember, so as straight as Sunday, and white napkins, and a bucket full of raspberries standing on the floor. And my desire, which wasn't born yet, only gardens and weeds and the amber of Queen Anne cherries and indecent Fredro. There was always too much of Lvov. No one could comprehend its burrows, hear the murmur of each stone scorched by the sun. At night, the Orthodox Church's silence was unlike that of the cathedral. The Jesuits baptized plants leaf by leaf, but they grew so mindlessly, and joy hovered everywhere, in hallways and in coffee mills revolving by themselves, in blue teapots, in starch, which was the first formalist, in drops of rain, and in the thorns of roses. Frozen forsythia yellowed by the window. The bells pealed and the air vibrated. The cornets of nuns sailed like schooners near the theater. There was so much of the world that it had to do encores over and over. The audience was in frenzy and didn't want to leave the house. My aunts couldn't have known yet that I'd resurrect them, and lived so trustfully, so singly. Servants, clean and ironed, cleaned, clean and ironed, ran for fresh cream. Sorry. Ser- Servants, clean and ironed, ran for fresh cream. Inside the houses, a bit of anger and great expectation. Zagajewski came as a visiting lecturer. One of my uncles kept writing a poem entitled Why, dedicated to the Almighty. And there was too much of Lvov. It brimmed the container. It burst glasses, overflowed each pond, lake, smoked through every chimney, turned into fire, storm, laughed with lightning, grew meek, returned home, read the New Testament, slept on a sofa beside the Carpathian rug. There was too much of Lvov. And now there isn't any. It grew relentlessly, and the scissors cut it. Chilly gardeners, as always in May, without mercy, without love. Ah, wait till warm June comes with soft ferns, boundless fields of summer, i.e., the reality. But scissors cut it along the line and through the fiber. Tailors, gardeners, censors cut the body and the wreaths. Pruning shears work diligently, as in a child's cutout along the dotted line of a roe deer or a swan. Scissors, penknives, and razor blades scratched, cut, and shortened the voluptuous dresses of prelates, of squares and houses, and trees fell soundlessly as in a jungle, and the cathedral trembled. People bade goodbye without handkerchiefs, no tears, such a dry mouth. I won't see you anymore. So much death awaits you. Why must every city become Jerusalem, every man a Jew? And now in a hurry, just pack, always, each day, and go breathless. Go to Lvov. After all, it exists, quiet and pure as a peach. It is everywhere. Uh, Well, any thoughts about the whole poem? I mean, um, uh, what what's it doing? What does it add up to for you, for us? Oh, can we unmute everyone? Denise, just a second. You're still muted.
There, I think I'm unmuted.
There it goes.
Yeah.
I think it's just what Kaminsky said. It's an elegy for what was, and it's also a hymn to life.
Yeah.
So most of the life comes before the elegy, I think, in the structure of the poem. You have the proliferation of leaves, and then you have the rather brutal pruning and cutting of the leaves toward the end, but a sense that the ark will come up again.
Yeah.
Or a hope.
Ruth?
I said,
that
or
you?
a hope, or a hope.
Yeah.
It's right now, it's hard to have a sense that the ark will come up again, but there's hope.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just want to say, if anybody wants to unmute themselves, just tap your space bar and that will automatically unmute you.
Oh, good.
Dale,
No.
you're
Yeah,
still
you're
muted,
still muted.
but I see your lips moving.
There you
There
go.
you go.
What I think of, what this poem always made me feel so connected to is I think that a lot of Jewish Americans of my generation had grandparents who were always referring to the old country. And they never referred to it really as the place they had to flee. And they were usually children when they left, or young teenagers. And the sort of sense of that phrase without much detail, because they weren't very articulate and they didn't have much detail, that was a sort of idealization of like a lost paradise, the old country. And what's really amazing reading this, and I'm so glad that Lloyd chose it today, was today. You know, that this has so much resonance, and the history of Lvov, which kept changing and its ownership kept changing, really, up until it's still changing. It's still changing. It's terrible to be aware when this is happening to it.
Yeah.
But it has all the Adam is such a great poet, and sort of strong and also delicate in feelings. So the memories that he's imagining forming by being able to go to Lvov are really beautiful. There's no irony in it. You know, there's just, it's really an ode to the old country, to the lost home, and full of richness.
And even the name has been changing.
Right. And changed from a word that looks like love.
Yeah.
To us.
Yeah. And
the country that it's been part of has been changed repeatedly in the last century and a half.
There's actually a play on that in the poem. Lvov, Lviv all refer to lion, of course, and was named after Leo, the son of a 13th century monarch, I think.
Right, yes.
But when he talks about the Russian soft sign, the Polish spelling of Lvov has 4 characters. The Russian spelling has 5, because a soft sign, which looks like a little b, is interpolated between the L and the first V. So it goes from something like Lvov to Lvov. And so when he talks about the snake, the garden snake of a soft sign, it slipped into the very spelling of Lvov.
Oh, I was hoping you would tell us about that.
No, you weren't.
Yes, I was. I really was. Um, um, um,
Because there's so much we don't know about Lvov, really. So
Right.
that piece of information adds to it's being sort of shaken up by so many different cultures.
But all the names are more or less variants on lion.
huh.
Even I think the German Lemberg, Lion
Yes.
City or something like that. It's
Yes.
Wow.
I
Yeah.
like that the Russians are equated with snakes. And I don't know if that had any intention to be something kind of negative.
well, they're harmless garden snakes. I don't know what his intention would have been.
They're snakes. Snakes in the grass.
Right.
What's
Right.
an eagle without a snake?
Snakes always represent evil. They do.
No,
No,
Yeah. When you're talking about when a bunch of lines away, you've got Orthodox Church, cathedral. They can't go together and not be noticed.
Phrase snake in a grass means something sneaky, and maybe it's only hindsight that tells us it was something.
Right.
Susan Donnelly talking. I love the repeated. There's always too much of Lvov, which seemed to me a wonderful statement about any loved city. The city is just brimming over with all these things, but it also
Brimming,
is
yeah.
the feeling of a child. It's so much of the impressions of a child. There's so much to take in, the family and the family ways and what happened when they visited this house and what they looked at and so forth. So that plenitude of celebration of city and also of memory of family is there, I think.
Yeah. But though I think in with Zagajewski, he left, he was forced out of the city before he could possibly have any memory of it. So his what on one level seems to be a memory is also a kind of fantasy.
Yeah, an evocation. Right.
Yeah, an evocation of something that he never really experienced.
I feel
Catherine?
I feel that the first few words are consistent with what you're just saying, that it's disorienting to begin with an infinitive.
Right.
To go
Right.
to live up. There's no person. It is disequilibrating. It was to me, as a reader, as what the things that people are saying about memories and a child's impressions or memories or imagined memories, sort of located in human experience and especially in human emotional experience. But it begins with a sentence. Well, it's not a sentence, actually. It begins with an infinitive. So there's no person. There's not a first person. There's not a third person. There's just
Right. And
that
empty,
a verb empty of, I'm sorry, of a location, sort of.
Yeah, and it's already in the title.
Yes, yes.
that the title is this, I don't know, what do you, how would you, it's a kind of idea. It's a kind of
Dream.
concept
Yeah, an
that,
abstraction.
an abstraction that we don't really understand, and that in some way takes the entire poem to kind of teach us what that concept is. Wendell. Yeah,
Oh, it says if not in a dream, but there's no then. There's no answer to. If not in a dream, there's no then how.
Right.
yeah.
Yes, so it's
Yeah.
further disequilibrating.
Talks about leaving in haste for Lvov, which makes it sound like it's the refuge, not the place that was fled from. And I get, through the poem, I'm always kind of halfway between, is he going to Lvov or is he leaving Lvov? It's just something I need to read more carefully.
Yeah, well, he's literally, he was leaving it when he was an infant, and imaginatively, oh, oh yeah, there's a I
It's
hope,
incidental. It's incidental. You can disregard it now, but
What about it?
I'm sorry, which, no, there was a comment in the chat about that was asking about
sorry.
Brzezinski, who was as far as I can tell, I've just been trying to look up the two names that I was not familiar with, Fredro and Brzezinski. Fredro was a Polish playwright, both 19th century figures, and Brzezinski was a Polish philosopher. I think not the general. I think the philosopher, famous Polish philosopher, famous in Poland certainly, who actually appeared in the town. This is sort of like saying, Einstein came to Lvov once before I was born. Famously came to the town, and people still remember that. And Brzezinski and Fredro, indecent Fredro, who was a Polish nobleman who wrote naughty plays, comic plays, kind of sex comedies and poetry, and I hadn't heard of him. I don't know anything about Polish literature of before the 20th century. So anyway, there was a question about that, and I had a question about it, and it did a bit of digging around to find out what who those figures were. Wendell, you were gonna say something?
I did.
Okay.
I have a question. Hi.
Susan.
It's a heartbreaking poem to me. And I love the imagery, domesticity, intellectual life, architecture, maids in starched uniforms, nuns, in school, looking like schooners. But it reminded me of our conversation last time about the Grecian urn, the imagination. It's a made up urn from Keats's imagination. I wonder if this is also a Lvov of this poet's imagination.
Gail, what I think it has to be imagination and maybe family history and such a mixture of sources
Yeah.
for these memories. But I also and I don't know if it's too early to bring this up, but I think you're already bringing it up. The style of the poem, the language of the poem is really interesting to me because it's not. I mean, some of it is very straightforward and very vivid, but some of it is also kind of surrealistic and totally surprising and almost undermining itself as it goes along. Jennifer, what were you putting in the chat box?
I hesitate to try to speak because
You're sounding fine.
I just feel like the sweep of this poem and the question of whether it's going back to an historical Lvov or heading towards a wished and imagined Lvov, and the way that place and the journey towards it is built up out of a mix of details and a sort of incantatory structure that I say incantatory, but I mean also understated. It doesn't feel lofty. That it reminds me of, and this feels of two quite different poems, Frost's wonderful Directive that begins, back out of all this now too much for us. and he tracks back again through specific details and descriptions to a child's playhouse where we're invited to pick up the cup and drink and be whole again beyond confusion. So there's that move, and then there's Bishop's wonderful At the Fish Houses, which is also moving through the particulars and details of the landscape she's in towards the ocean as a source of knowledge, the seawater as a source of knowledge, moving down into it. I think of her lines repeating in it, and I'll get this wrong, but deep, dark, cold, and absolutely clear element bearable to no mortal. She repeats those movements, those lines, the way Zagajewski repeats the scissors in a way, taking us towards something she wishes to touch, but she doesn't end the way Frost does with drinking and be whole beyond confusion. She ends saying, if you put your hand in the water, it is like what we imagine knowledge to be, because knowledge is historical, flowing and flown. So again, I mean that one arrives at this extremely vivid sense of touching what has to be let go, historical knowledge, and the other lifts a cup and drinks from this moment, the pure draft, drink and be whole again beyond confusion, that the child might have had, but those aren't as opposed and as they might seem in describing them. And I think Zagajewski is tracing this same kind of journey. Where do we want to go, and did it exist, and does it exist, and how do we call it up in the incantation
Right.
of the poem?
And that begins at the very beginning. To go to Lvov, which station for Lvov, if not in a dream? So the whole issue of where is this place is brought up at the very beginning of the poem. That, I mean, for him, it kind of has to be a dream, or or remembering what his family said about it, because he never really experienced it.
Well, do we know that he never went there as an adult? I mean, that's one thing I wondered.
Surely he went there as an adult. But I think what he is, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I would imagine that he did go there as an adult, but that what he is really calling up in this poem is this dream world that he didn't experience as a child, because he was like 4 months old when his family was deported from that city. Jonathan, yeah.
And it does on the further down, there was too much of Lvov, and now there isn't any. So all these things he's describing are things that are lost. Is the way.
Yeah, I think that's right.
He can't bring it back except as to imagine.
Yeah.
I'm interested in the fact, Susan Donnelly talking
Yeah.
anonymously here.
Yeah.
Hi, it's David.
Right.
I'm interested in the fact that it begins with leaving in haste, and it ends that way too. So it has that feeling of rushing, almost like what we're seeing now, hurrying out, grabbing a few belongings and getting to this place quick.
Yeah. When dew gleams on a suitcase, and that's one of my 200 most favorite things in this poem. That wonderful image of, you get up in the morning and the dew is on your suitcase, and that's what you remember. The haste is suggestive of the Passover.
I don't know whether, this is Chris, I don't know whether I'm unduly influenced by today being today.
What the today is, yeah.
But his saying, why must every city become Jerusalem and every man a Jew? I think that for me, the resonance of that is, this is Jerusalem, the beautiful, which has been destroyed, and we hope someday to go back to it. And I think the poet is saying, no, do it now. Do it now, don't wait.
Mm-hmm.
Don't think of what Jerusalem was, think of what it is.
Mm-hmm.
How do we arrive at now? As opposed to being always in either the past or in the future.
Yeah, Catherine.
A question for someone who speaks Polish. In some languages, the verb to be is left out, and it is a sentence without it. Is that true of Polish?
Our Polish expert isn't here today, and I don't know the answer to that.
Because
Mariana, oh, I'm sorry.
Because the verb to be is as a verb is not here very often. And it's what's apparently missing in many of the sentences. And I just wondered if in Greek and Hebrew you can leave the verb to be out.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that.
Thank you.
I think Mariana.
Bill, how's your Polish?
Oh, no.
Non-existent, I'm sorry to say.
Oh, and for Bill Bennett, I can sort of make out Polish if I have the matching text. And it looks to me as though the verb to be, is not used in the poem. So that's probably a good guess. The first word, jechać, could mean either going to Lvov or to go to Lvov. The translator chose to go to Lvov, but it could also be on the fly. Going to Lvov, which station for Lvov, could have that hurried feel.
That's right.
Yeah. Gail, you said that Adam really liked this translation.
Adam
Or he liked his translator.
He really liked his translator. And
Mhm.
I think that to go to Lvov is all about the fact that it would be an aspiration and a dream, whereas going to Lvov would seem like a fact almost. That this is all. My feeling is Adam went after he wrote this poem, which was in the 80s.
Yeah.
It was, things were getting freer and freer, except in Poland. And then he finally actually ended up living in Krakow as well as Paris. But I've been thinking this little section where he says, at night, the Orthodox Church's silence was unlike that of the cathedral. The Jesuits baptized plants, leaf by leaf, but they grew so mindlessly, and joy hovered everywhere in hallways and in coffee mills, revolving by themselves, in blue teapots, in starch, which was the first formalist, which I just love. It's sort of pure Adam Zagajewski in the middle of this sort of aspirational fantasy about going back to the place that he had never been to, that obviously his grandparents and parents talked about, and that was a dream place, and he's trying to fill it in this poem. He's trying to imagine it, and in fact, historically, he was on the brink of being able to do that. And now, here we are.
Yeah, now here we are.
I always, when I've heard people pronounce Lvov or Lviv, they almost don't say the L at all.
Really?
And I'm not sure. I don't remember noticing when Adam read this poem about that, but
I don't know, Bill.
it is so
Bill Bennett.
Poles have two L's. One is soft, and the other one, the one with the little line through it, is pronounced more like a W. So this might have been pronounced with a very soft L, Lvov, Lvov, with a minimal L.
Thank you. And that's also the way Lviv is pronounced now.
Right, again with a soft L. That's the Ukrainian and Russian both have a soft sign interpolated after the L to make it more Lvov or Lviv rather than Lvov or Lviv.
Thank you.
And Mariana, before we get going, I know you've raised your hand to say something.
Oh,
please.
It was something related to earlier discussion, so it was interesting.
That's okay. You can go back.
So on basically being on whether he's seen the place as a kid or remembers anything of it. I think there is something which struck me in the poem, which he has this line in which he describes what it is to have been banished, and he says to vanish like fainting maidens. It's basically, it feels to me it's about much bigger. It is about, it's bigger thing than a place. The place is a metaphor, and it's about destruction. It's about what's happening currently in Ukraine. It's about not having a will, not being able to be allowed to have your roots or to have your identity taken away from you. And he's grown up with this. And I know, in a way, I guess Central Europe, or in general, these regions have been taken by one country or another, and people have been dislodged and so forth, and they kind of seem like a lump thing, but they're quite different. So he moved from one place to another that was very different, and he must have been really aware of how different and how disconnected and not belonging. It's not belonging. It's why the ending is so powerful. He claims it to be everywhere. He belongs.
Yes.
That's all I want to say.
Yeah. Well, that whole section of the poem about scissors cut it along the lines and through the fiber, tailors, gardeners, censors cut the body and the wreaths, pruning shears work diligently as in a child's cutout. So here is all this history and memory being removed, being cut out, which he never knew, but only either heard about or imagined. But then, yeah, like as you say about the Grecian urn, the imagination is everywhere. So there's always some kind of place in the imagination in poetry to recreate this, to bring this back. I go back toward the beginning when dew gleams on a suitcase, and that must be something that he is imagining, but that he is maybe remembering his family talking about, and having to leave very suddenly for this place that was actually part of Germany, which became part of the Soviet Union. When express trains and bullet trains are being born. So this is, he left in 1945 when he was just a few months old. So, and on a train.
One thing I was going to say about the poem that I think is pertinent is the flip side of deracination, of anxiety, and all of that is acceptance. And through the troubling aspects of the poem, and certainly as we're seeing it today, there's what Kaminsky called the joy that the poem contains. And I think there's a lot of acceptance. There's a spirit of acceptance, and he's going to catalog a lot of things, and it could be anywhere, but he names it Lvov, and with its troubled history, it could only be this place. While it could be anywhere, and what gives it its identity is the shiftiness. He knows the hands that have tailored and censored, and he's registered all of that. And then there's even the snails, the locals in the cafe. He calls them snails, talking about eternity, which I thought was very funny. Sort of an image of.
I thought those were real snails.
Well, sure.
And,
also, they could be too.
And
they're talking
I
of
wasn't
eternity.
sure. I mean, it's a Venetian cafe.
Yes.
And I wasn't sure. I think maybe it could be both, you know, the snails on the ground and the snails they were eating.
Yeah, the subject of the actions of the verb gets very confused. Lvov itself is going to go back and read the New Testament or whatever, and but I mean, there's a great the joy. I think I sense this too, the love, the joy, but I think is just a great acceptance of a place that has been through so much, and the great fact of the poem to me was the abundance, the superabundance of cataloging all the sensations and things there. And he kept saying, there's too much of you. It's almost like there's too much I can't put into this poem. There's too much of you for people to contain you in a border and so forth. So, I mean, those are the things, I mean, that came to me as the fact of the poem itself.
Yeah. Well, to go back a few minutes to the word, to the name of the city, and how many times it's repeated in the poem, and just over and over and over again, not and beginning with the title, but so many times, and that repetition itself. And you know, Gail's comment about how it sort of in English it sounds like love.
Yeah.
And that had to be something that Adam was totally aware of.
Well, yeah, it's become a signal in his mind. And I thought also what was very important, Lloyd, in the first few lines, he mentions, if not in a dream, where? So it's in a dream at dawn, and the dream at dawn, if I remember Dante saying there's something peculiar, something revelatory about dreams that we have just before we wake at dawn. So there are things guiding him to the name, to the word, in a premonitory way, perhaps, which is why he has trouble locating it, but it is going to be important, you know, and it's important for him to remember this. If it exists, if it's real at all or whatever, but he talks about the passport, the suitcase. He evokes the whole image of getting there, and then the idea is also strongly brought across that what is put in language can never be the thing itself. You're always trying to say, is this how do you get to the thing through language? It can only be representative. I mean, you know.
In this article by Ilya Kaminsky, in this memorial article, he talks about Adam telling him that he hated Dante.
Why?
He does not explain. But I thought,
sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
A question. I wanted to go back to his mentioning Jerusalem at the end of the poem.
Oh, yeah.
That's such a big image. Historically, poetically, in literature. I mean, why do you think he throws that in?
Probably for that reason.
Any thoughts? Susan?
Well, I was just thinking probably for that reason, I was thinking of William Blake's Jerusalem and the hymn Jerusalem, the golden, milk and honey blessed, and so forth. So it's an aspiring, wonderful place.
Denise?
Maybe not exactly in this context here, but that's what occurs to me from your general question.
Denise and then Mary.
I think of Jerusalem as the city of origin, of a kind of origin, and overlaid with many layers of symbolism, and probably for a lot of people constructed in the same way as the Lvov of the poem, from remembered bits of recollection and sort of mythic stories. I know, remembering, overhearing a conversation between two older Jewish Americans who had actually lived in Jerusalem before 1948, talking about it and saying, oh, the smell of orange blossoms, the sound of the bells in the morning, the nuns walking outside the city gates singing. And I can't think of Jerusalem anymore without those images.
Yeah.
But of course, it has many others.
Mary?
Oh, yeah, I was going to comment on, I was going to say a little bit of what Denise said, but I was really struck by, there's the reference to the uncles. I think it's an uncle. I've been having trouble finding it. Okay, one of my uncles kept writing a poem entitled Why. And that does seem to be the, it just seems to echo, right?
Addressed to God.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. So I found that a kind of lovely, unexpected relationship between the uncle and the poet.
But isn't Jerusalem also the city that was, that was destroyed?
Yeah.
And that, that we're all Jewish because our childhoods don't exist anymore. The city where we come from doesn't exist anymore. Something like that. But also, we're all exiles. It's obviously a very loaded phrase to come at the end, destroyed over and over again. Yeah, Jennifer.
Well, I want to zero in on an image that's speaking to me today about the first time the scissors appear, because I'm kind of obsessed with them, and it comes at the end of such a long sentence. But now there isn't any. It grew relentlessly, and the scissors cut it. Chilly gardeners, as always, in May, without mercy, without love. Ah, wait till warm June. I should say we were merciless pruning back the forsythia, which right now is little stumps and a few green leaves. And I never believe it when I prune things back, that they will come back. And I think there's something wonderfully mixed about this image of the scissors that come back and sever things and cut things, since it's introduced, it's introduced with the chilly gardeners. And then the cut things do come back, and you prune them so that they will come back. So I'm not canceling what all the other scissors cut away.
Right.
But it's
right.
It's that mix that I love in this poem that that will come in with an image like that, and the scissors coming back.
I think that's that mix that Ilya Kaminsky is talking about, that it's elegy and it's an elegy and a hymn to life. And that that both really exist in his imagination, and that's what I I think this. Oh, where is this? Oh yeah. Um, the bells pealed and the air vibrated. The cornets of nuns sailed like schooners near the theater. I mean, this just this strange, almost surrealist conglomeration of stuff going on, and it's all kind of thrilling and fascinating and surprising. When is your hand up? Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Well, I wanted to go back just a bit to Jerusalem and
Okay.
the and the universal at this time of year next year in Jerusalem,
Yes.
which we said last year and the year before and the year before. And we know as we say it this year that next year we will say next year in Jerusalem, because Jerusalem never, we never arrive in Jerusalem.
Right.
We die first. And so Jerusalem, that's why it's elegiac. It's for ourselves. That's the universal, that's what underlies every Chopin nocturne, that ache, that will never make it, but boy, doesn't it feel good to dream about it.
Well, it's the messianic age that never arrives. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
I want to say one thing about Adam's voice, and that is that through this really profound poem that has of a subject that touches us all, certainly today, there's always something a little droll that comes in that sort of makes you not only be moved by the poem, but enjoy it, enjoy it with a sort of smile. And it seems to me that the nature of the speaker is, well, I would say delicious, but that's really, I know that's too much, but
No.
But it's there. I mean, this is a really not a frivolous poem in any way, but it has these moments like the starch. Like, what was that starch I found? In blue teapots and starch.
The starched aprons, the starched aprons, the formalists, the first formalists.
The first formalist, yeah. I mean, it's kind of irresistible in the middle of this really resonant and profound poem. It's about this, even the thing about the uncle that keeps writing a poem entitled "Why," dedicated to the Almighty, is funny. It's like he's funny about the sort of futility of his uncle's lifelong literary project.
Right.
And it gives a sort of wonderful balance to his work.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I love the coffee mill. Just before that, the coffee mills revolving by themselves. This fantasy of kind of not exactly perfection, but this magic of a world in which coffee mills revolve by themselves. That's just, obviously it couldn't have really happened, but it's it's what he imagines
And
this
it's magical.
magical. Yeah, yeah.
I also like that Susan talking, I love my aunts couldn't have known that I'd resurrect them and live so trustfully. It's almost as though they were proper, and I'm not sure they wanted to be resurrected or thought that was actually the proper thing to have happen to you. But you know, the same humor is put in that one area there, kind of.
Yeah.
You know.
No. I'm so glad you mentioned that, because that's so true, and that he's obviously just having, on one level, this, as you say, this profound poem must have been so much fun to write.
Yeah.
Or parts of it must have been so much fun to write.
As we've been talking about Ukrainian and Russian, and then Polish, and the sounds of of various different languages, the reference to Esperanto is very funny.
I love that.
Which completely gives the lie, Esperanto was the aspiration to a universal language. These differences would fall away. We would all live in harmony.
Right. But only if Lvov exists, if it is to be found within the frontiers and not just in my passport, if lances of trees of poplar and ash, and I don't know why naming those specific trees is so touching. I find it very moving that he is actually picturing these particular trees still breathe aloud like Indians. And then where does that come from? Or his childhood imagination of cowboys and Indians living in this Polish community in Germany. And
You're thinking Native American Indians, not Far East? I think so.
I think so, but I can't be sure of that. Mary?
I was just thinking that there's something, I mean, the Native Americans, of course, their origin, their place, I mean, there's destruction there in their history and the lostness of their, pre-European invasion world. In a way, I love how surprising it is, but it does kind of work. In my mind, it works a little bit better as Native American.
Yeah.
In which case, there are two references to genocide, more or less, in the poem: the Native Americans and the Jews. And you wonder about his stance relative to Poland's history of anti-Semitism. And of course, Poland was the home of Auschwitz.
Yeah.
And it's in
though,
Poland now.
Though Lvov was a big
Jewish
center.
Yes. Well, it was a vibrant cosmopolitan city.
Right.
With an opera house and a law school and all kinds of stuff. But it was very Jewish.
And a history of Ukrainians trying to rescue Jews during the war, especially towards the end of the war.
Although the Ukrainians themselves, as a whole, don't have a great history there, but
yeah, right,
yeah,
right. But near the end of the war, there was something
koshering themselves.
Yeah, that's right. Right.
I'm assuming that Zagajewski was not himself Jewish, just from the name.
No,
I'm sorry.
He was Catholic.
Catholic, yeah.
Yeah.
I would have assumed that.
The cathedrals and the nuns.
I don't know if he was a practicing Catholic, but
Doesn't sound like it.
Right.
I want to, since we know that this is Delia, I've decided
yeah.
that he's Catholic. I have to mention Easter also and the resurrection, which is the resurrected aunt. And I mean, it's spring coming from winter. It's a possibility.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
I think it's there.
Yeah, I agree. So do I.
There's an interesting tracery throughout of plants and animals kind of interwoven. The burdocks, the poplars, the snails, it's the strawberries, I don't know what to make of it, but it's quite striking, that thread.
Yeah, well, all these kind of living things, I guess, burgeoning things, growing things. I think, part of what Ilya Kaminsky calls that hymn to life. Everything is, there's so much that's growing. Yeah, exactly, Michael. Burdocks, burrs clinging to everything. Yeah. Yeah.
I just want to say one thing about that Adam that wrote this, and that we became friends because we were teaching together and we were aliens in Houston, but also we both loved cats, and we would go for walks together, and Adam would talk to the cats more than I did. He was just, and it was absolutely, there was nothing affected about it. And when years later we got to see each other in Paris, when he was still not living in Krakow yet, he wanted to take me for a walk through the arcades, because there were so many of the little shops had cats in the doorway. And he took me on the catwalk of the Parisian arcades. It's one of the reasons that I can't not think of that sweet, droll aspect of him that comes up in really, I mean, this is a beautiful poem, and it's sort of elegiac and positive, celebratory. But there's so much sweetness in his nature. And I think it comes in with this sort of droll, slightly droll surprises in a serious poem, like the uncle writing the poem saying why is funny. It's over and over again.
Yeah. Yeah, what about that peach? At the end of the poem.
It's domestic.
It exists, quiet and pure as a peach.
It's both nature and homely, domestic piece of food.
Juicy.
I don't know. And it matches the bucket of raspberries earlier in the poem.
Yeah.
A lot of peach.
Yeah.
And it's as if trees bearing fruit are everywhere. So
would it have in Polish the same as he's a peach? As a person, a person's a peach?
Does anyone know?
I was
Raspberries and peaches are among the more perishable of fruits.
I find that the quiet is about the last word we expect after this incredibly, wonderfully active, I mean, almost too active, right? Too regenerative to end up at the end of the poem, after all it exists, quiet is not what we've been hearing. So I find that shift both fascinating and abrupt, and above all, as surprising as so many of the conflation and the disorientation that happens, as we read this amazing poem. But I just wanted to comment on that. I find it such a daring move, for the poet to make, to bring us through this almost like a carnival, quiet and pure. But to me, that kind of goes back to that the kind of Keatsian imaginative aspect. Just like the opening to go to Lvov, it's like an imaginative proposition.
Yes, that's a very interesting connection, that the quiet and pure is not what he's been describing, but it is that for him, in part, a refuge, a coming home. That's really interesting.
Jennifer, Gesundheit. Were you quoting Marvel in the chat?
Yeah. It seems, again, the same. I've been thinking of it too, because of because of all the plants, the plenitude, the growingness, and the cutting. I keep thinking, "'Twas beyond a mortal's share to wander solitary there." That we leave the garden, but the garden is the place where you stumble on melons and you put out your hand and the peach falls into it. And I think this last peach at the end is kind of like that magical gesture. I don't know.
I mean, you could imagine this poem ending go to Lvov. After all, it exists. It is everywhere. And that would have been a good ending. But this is just, it's just one more kind of astonishing moment that just surprises you, that kind of both comes out, delicious, that comes out of nowhere and comes out of everywhere. That the whole poem is sort of, there's this thread that's going through the whole poem, and that it's, I mean, it makes me think of, the Mel Brooks as the 2,000-year-old man, and Carl Reiner is interviewing him, and he says, what's the greatest thing that has ever been invented in the 2,000 years since you've existed? And he says, the nectarine. and that it's kind of like that this is this fabulous thing that we kind of take for granted, and yet all of this fruitfulness is really running throughout the entire poem, and it's just marvelous. There was too much love. It's the quiet from which a poem can emerge. Yeah. Well, I don't know. Anything else that you want, Jonathan, please.
I'm curious about how you think about the whole section with the scissors and the pruning shears and the child's cutouts. It has this sort of domestic feeling to it, even at that point, even amid the destruction. Whereas historically there were some pretty amazingly catastrophic things that went on while he was living, and yet he
Yeah.
presents it as something very kind of gentle, which I find a little disorienting. How do you read those?
Yeah, well, as both, really. I mean, I'm thinking about the you know, there was too much of love. It brimmed the container. It and an image I love.
Mm.
It doesn't brim over the container. It brims over the lake that follows, but brim the container, burst glasses, overflowed each pond lake, smoke through every chimney, turned into fire, storm, laughed with lightning, grew meek, returned home, read the New Testament, slept on a sofa beside the Carpathian rug. It was too much of Lvov, and now there isn't any. It grew relentlessly, and the scissors cut it. Chilly gardeners, as always in May, without mercy, without love. Ah, wait till warm June comes with soft ferns, boundless fields of summer. This is what Jennifer was talking about before, i.e., the reality. But scissors cut it along the line and through the fiber, so that it's kind of all of the above. There's something ruthless about it, but also something, we hope, something positive and regenerative. So I think it's all of those things.
A kind of palimpsest.
Yeah.
Dale had mentioned the droll quality. I think that for a poet to use IE is droll.
Yes.
Because
Not in the original.
Here's the real McCoy.
It's not in the original.
It's not in the original. I'm not sure what the word is, but it is not in the original. He may have approved that use. I don't know.
Certainly. Well, his English was also impeccable.
Yeah.
And he could certainly read English, and he approved of this. He certainly approved of this translation. So
whatever it is in Polish, it's the abbreviation isn't there.
I see. Yeah. You've actually looked at it in Polish.
Yes.
And where did you find it?
I think I saw somewhere the Polish title of the poem, and so I just entered that in Google, and that made it easier. I can write the link. I'll put the link in the chat.
Well,
it's a
it's
parallel.
Not going to do me any. It's not going to do me any good.
It's this translation in parallel with the Polish, so I can triangulate from English to Russian to Polish. And it's at babelmatrix.org.
Well, you have some takers.
Okay.
Yeah. Anything to add? I mean, there, I have, I have some reluctance to bring in poems in translation, because for most of us, the original language is a little out of reach. Certainly for me. But that there is something obviously very satisfying and um, huh. Oh, thank you. Yeah. The poem works in English.
And the translation seems to be quite literal. It's very close.
But not IE.
But not IE that I can read, that I can see.
Oh, well, good question. Do we know if this is a poem that's known in Ukraine and
it's beloved in Poland?
It's beloved in Poland.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's well known in Poland. It crops
Yeah.
up. There's it's read aloud. If you search on the title, you'll get somebody reading it. It takes about 5.5 minutes to read in Polish.
Wow.
And you'll hear it read.
How long did it take to read in English?
I don't know how long it took you. I think you went a little faster.
I would think it wasn't quite 5 minutes, but I wasn't timing it.
Yeah. It's 5 or 6 minutes in Polish in that particular YouTube reading.
Was it just that the pace was slower, or that there were actually things that were abbreviated like IE?
Nothing was abbreviated. The pace
Nothing was abbreviated. Yeah.
The pace was deliberate.
Yeah. Well, any postscripts, any further comments? I thought this was a very good, it just seemed the inevitable poem to talk about this weekend, this month. Poem I've loved, and thank you so much for I will just mention that that Denise has a book of poems, a chapbook called Curious Peach, from the same source that Jennifer mentioned earlier. And happy holidays, everyone, and see you next month. I hope, all of you, and thank you for participating. And Marita, thank you again for being such a welcoming host. And the library is open. This is the little east branch of the Somerville Library on Broadway, and thank you as always. We couldn't have done this without you. And thanks everyone for coming. And
thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lloyd. Thanks for choosing such a beautiful and touching poem and really sharing this with us. It was incredibly emotional.
Yes.
Yeah. And Gail is not, Gail had an appointment at 12:30, but it was really Gail talking about this poem a few weeks ago that put it in my mind, and I'm so grateful to her. It's a poem I've loved, but that, boy, it is it ever timely.